Hey guys, what's going on? MJ Madness here, and the NHL season is right around the corner. So today, I am going to be giving you my complete preview and predictions. Now, hockey is back, but it's going to look a little bit different this year just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mainly, the season has been shortened to 56 games, and we have 4 brand new divisions, and teams will only be playing regular season games within those divisions. The playoff format's going to look a little bit different too, with the top 4 teams in each division being the ones that move on to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and every other team is left behind. So today what I'm going to be doing is breaking down each division one by one and giving you my predictions for the standings, who's going to make the playoffs, and then at the end of the video, who I think is going to take home the Stanley Cup. So without further ado, let's get right into it by looking at the North Division. This division is going to be so much fun. All Canadian, there's a bunch of rivalries, and it'll be so great to see all of these teams face off. I think it's also a very good division. It might not be the best, though I definitely think they have an argument for that, but I think it's for sure the deepest, because I see 6 of the 7 teams in this division that all have a case to make the playoffs. So, in 7th place, though, the team I see that will definitely be out of the running, unfortunately, is the Ottawa Senators. These guys are still in that rebuilding phase, but I think for the first time in a while, they're headed in the right direction. They're slowly acquiring some nice young pieces. They've made some good moves in the offseason. I think they're trending upwards, but I still think they're a few years away. So I definitely think they are going to be the team that's firmly at the bottom of this all-Canadian division. In 6th place, I'm going with the Winnipeg Jets. And this is tough because I could easily see Winnipeg being a playoff team. They made the play-in round last year, and once again, they have a Vezina Trophy winning goaltender in Connor Hellebuck, and this absolutely amazing top 6. That's going to make them competitive night in and night out. But the problem is, once again, they have a very poor defensive group, and they have little to no depth on this team. So I think in a season that's as short and as compact and as fast-paced as this one, you need to have that depth and you need to have good defense. And so I think while they'll definitely make a push for the playoffs and be sort of in contention all year long, in the end, I see them falling short. In 5th place in this all-Canadian division, I'm going with the Montreal Canadiens. Now, the Canadiens are getting a lot of hype going into this season. There's a lot of people thinking that they'll make the playoffs, and I think they'll be close, but I don't think they're quite there yet. I think people are building them up a little bit too much just because they had this amazing and surprising postseason run last year where they knocked off Pittsburgh, and then they made some flashy moves in the offseason. But look at the team itself, and I think they still have a little bit more building they need to do. Now, they do have some nice ingredients there, some good young players, perhaps the best goaltending in the division with Carey Price, and amazing defense as well, but I still think they just need to grow a little bit more before they're going to be that consistent playoff threat. And in a division as deep as this North one, I think that means they'll be just short of a playoff spot. Just because I don't know if they have the high-end talent and sort of the experience that some of the teams above them have. And in 4th place, the team that I think is going to be taking up that last playoff spot in this North Division, I'm going with the Edmonton Oilers. And this is what I mean by comparing it to Montreal not necessarily having that high-end talent. Edmonton, I think, on paper, doesn't have the same defense as Montreal, doesn't have nearly as good goaltending, doesn't have the same depth, but they have McDavid and Draisaitl. And I think in the end, that high-end talent is going to triumph this year. I think that's going to be enough for them. This team, it's so flawed, it has so many holes, but those are 2 of the best players in the entire league. I think they're definitely both top 5 players in the league. McDavid arguably the best in the entire NHL, and those guys alone are going to keep them in games all season long. And so, while I still think those numerous flaws mean they're not going to get any higher than 4th, I definitely think McDavid and Draisaitl will find a way to will these guys into a playoff spot. In 3rd place, I'm going with the Calgary Flames. The Flames, I think, are a bit of a dark horse in this Canadian division, but I definitely like the moves they've been making this offseason and think if they can put things all together, they definitely have a shot at really being a good contender this year. I think getting Markstrom in goal is such a big upgrade. Having that consistent goaltending is what you're going to need to make those runs into the playoffs. And I also think they have this good defense group. They have a very solid forward core with some good depth, but the real X factor is what's going to happen with Johnny Gaudreau and to a lesser extent Sean Monahan, because these guys, when they're on, they can be some of the best in the league. Calgary was first place in the West 2 years ago because of Gaudreau having that 99-point season. But the team goes with him, and I think if he is quiet and if he struggles like he has in the playoffs, then they might have to look at even trading him, and this team won't be very successful. But I think in the end, they'll be somewhere in the middle with Gaudreau. I don't think he's going to hit the highs that he could, but I still think he's going to be solid and good enough for them to be a consistent playoff team that I think should be able to make it in to this third spot in the North Division. In second place, I'm going with the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Canucks may have taken a bit of a step back this offseason after having a great playoff run. They lost a lot of players to Calgary, Jacob Markstrom, Chris Tanev, but they've made some additions as well. I think Braden Holtby might be the answer in goal, but I think beyond that, what really excites me about the Vancouver Canucks is their young talent taking a step forward. I think this is the team that has the best young talent, the most high potential young stars, and a lot of them have already hit that level, but I think they're just going to keep growing. And that's why I think the Canucks are still going to get better despite losing those key pieces. Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, those guys are just so solid, and I predict them continuing to improve, taking that leap. Thatcher Demko, too, in goal is a guy who really showed up in those few playoff games he played, and I think he's going to be good. And so I think that those steps forward by the young players, if they can contribute and show that leadership that needs to be done, then I think Vancouver will be able to snag that second spot in the division. But in first place in the All-Canadian division, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, they have these postseason demons. I don't know if they're going to get over those, but if you throw that all away, just looking at this team on paper in the regular season, they have a very good roster with so many high-skilled guys, so much talent, and I do like the moves they've been making. I think TJ Brody is a great acquisition on the back end for that. I'm super excited to see how Joe Thornton plays with the Leafs, and so I think whether or not they'll actually be able to get over the hump in the playoffs is another story, but I think at least during the regular season, the Leafs have enough talent on paper to be the top team in this Canadian division. The next division I'm going to be taking a look at now is the West Division. This one I think is perhaps the weakest, though there are still some very good teams at the top of this division. But in 8th place, I am going with the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks are firmly rebuilding. They have great goaltending, a few nice prospects, but I still think they have a long ways to go. So the Ducks may be the worst team in the entire NHL this season, unfortunately. They just have some old veterans who are a little bit over the hill and young talent that really isn't quite there yet. And so I think that's why the Ducks are going to really struggle this season. And in 7th place, I'm going with the Los Angeles Kings, who are in a very similar spot to the Ducks. I really like some of the young pieces they have. Quinton Byfield is going to be super exciting. But again, they have these old veterans who are just a little bit over the hill and on some huge contracts. And I think that's going to lead them to some struggles. So I think the Kings and the Ducks both are not really going to be in contention for a playoff spot this year. But those two, I think, are firmly in the basement. The teams from 6 onward, I could all see making a run to the playoffs. So the team I have in 6th place is the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks are a very interesting team because going into last season, people thought the Sharks would be a contender, one of the best teams in the Pacific, and instead they had this incredibly disappointing year with awful goaltending, everybody underachieved, and they missed the playoffs, gave away their draft pick, and really had this super underwhelming year. But I think as a result of that, people might be underrating the Sharks just a little bit. And I do think they're a step above their California rivals. And if they do put things together, I wouldn't be surprised to make it back for them to make it back to the playoffs in this weaker division. In the end, I don't think they'll quite get there, but I do think the Sharks will be competitive and a tough out and definitely give some teams a challenge in this West Division. In 5th place, the last team that I don't think will make the playoffs in the West, I'm going with the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes went all in last year, bringing in Taylor Hall. It didn't work. They did win that one play-in series over the Predators, which was definitely impressive, but when the actual Stanley Cup playoffs started, they really flamed out. They've had some controversy behind the scenes with GM John Chayka leaving the organization, and overall I just think there's a lot of turmoil here and not really enough consistency. And so I do think the team itself is solid, they're scrappy, they're young, but I don't think they have that high-end talent or that depth that's really going to make them a playoff team that's going to make any noise. And so I think the Coyotes will be on the bubble, but I see them falling just short in the end. In fourth place and taking up the first playoff spot in the West Division, I'm going with the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild, they're a super average team, I think, not overwhelming or underwhelming. They're sort of just there, very meh. And I don't think in any of the other three divisions they would be a playoff team. I think they'd be a bubble team. But in the West, I do think they're just a little bit above the teams below them, below their California rivals, above Arizona. And so I think just having that kind of average, consistent, solid play should be enough in this division. I don't think they'll be able to make any noise when the playoffs hit, but I like Cam Talbot, bringing him in goal. They're bringing in Kirill Kaprizov from Russia, who has some exciting potential, and they just have an experienced veteran roster. Nothing that's really going to wow you, but a team that's going to compete night in, night out, and that'll be enough, I think, for them to squeak into the playoffs in this division. And then moving over to the top three in the West, I think these three teams are really a cut above everybody else in this division, and any three of them I wouldn't be surprised to have a cup run and to really make some noise in the playoffs. But in third place, I'm going with the St. Louis Blues. Now, the Blues were Stanley Cup champions 2 years ago. Last year, they had that disappointing loss to Vancouver in the playoffs. This is still, though, a very good team. Now, they've lost Pietrangelo, their captain, which will hurt, but I think they've made some good moves in this offseason. They still have much of that same core, and I think that'll keep them competitive. And so while I think when the playoffs hit, I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to win a Stanley Cup again anytime soon, but this is still a very solid contender that I think should make the playoffs with no problem. And then in second place in the West Division, I'm going with the Vegas Golden Knights. The Golden Knights have taken Pietrangelo from the Blues, and I don't know how they do it with the cap space, but it's a very good move. Vegas is just a very loaded, flashy, high-powered team, great goaltending. They really have the ingredients, I think, to be a contender. And so I absolutely could see them making some noise when the playoffs start, and I think they'll be one of the better teams in the West and in the entire NHL this season. But the reason I don't have them in first is because of the team above them, and that team is the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche, I think, are here. They are ready to really put the league on notice that they are contenders. This team has just been slowly building with those young pieces, young stars, and I think now they're really ready. This will be the year, I think, where they fully break out, make a huge run in the playoffs, and win this division. They just have, it seems, everything. They have great defense, solid offense, good depth, good goaltending, good coaching, and then most importantly, they have that high-end talent. Nathan MacKinnon's one of the best players in the entire league, but he has a great top line mate and line mates to go along with him. And then Cale Makar on the back end, who's this amazing offensive defender himself. And so I really think this team is something special, and they have the pieces to really make some noise this year. But that's going to wrap up the West Division. The next division I'm going to be taking a look at is the Central Division. This is another interesting one with a few teams I think will be firmly in the basement, but again, some good talent at the top. So the team, though, that I see in 8th place in this division has got to be the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings had a historically bad season last year, and while I don't think they're going to be as bad as they were last season, I still don't think they're going to be very good. Again, this is a team that's slowly kind of getting those young pieces. I like their management. I think they're headed hopefully in the right direction, but they have a long ways to go, and they're really building from the bottom up. And so I think if you're a Detroit fan, you're really just looking for progress. You're looking for some flashes of potential from the young guys, and I don't think you should go into this season with any expectations of being super competitive. In 7th place, I'm going with the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, the Blackhawks had a really great run knocking off the Oilers in the summer Stanley Cup playoffs, in the bubble, whatever you want to call that. And I think maybe that got people's hopes up a little bit too much, because this Chicago team, they're building the ingredients again. I think they have good offense. They have obviously those veteran talents, though Taves will be sitting out this season, and I think they have some nice young players, but this team just has no depth. They've lost Corey Crawford, so they have these huge questions in goal, and it just seems like this will be a team that's going to struggle. And so I think the Blackhawks might be competitive. They have obviously some of the ingredients there, but I still think they have a lot more building to do before this team gets back to the highs they had in the early 2010s. In sixth place, I'm going with the Florida Panthers. The Panthers are another one of those sort of average, kind of meh, in the middle teams, sort of like the Minnesota Wild, I guess. But they're in this tougher division, so I see them back in sixth. Again, they're a team that has some nice pieces up front. Alexander Barkov is super underrated because he's playing in this small market. Ekblad, if he takes a step forward, he's going to be a great defenseman for them. But they don't have the pieces around him just yet. They haven't built that depth. And I think most importantly for them, they have these huge questions in goal. Because Sergei Bobrovsky, he's the highest paid goaltender in the NHL, Vezina Trophy winner. They signed him to this huge contract, and he's seriously disappointed in his first season. I think if he can get back to the level he was at, Florida could absolutely be a playoff team. But I just don't know if he's going to get there, and I think this team has too many questions to seriously be a playoff contender this year. So I think they're firmly in the middle of this division, middle of the pack team, might win some games, but ultimately not enough to seriously make a run for the postseason. In fifth place in the Central Division, I'm going with the Nashville Predators. Now, this might be a little controversial because many people are familiar with Nashville being this team that's made some great postseason runs recently, but I really think they're a team that's probably trending in the wrong direction. They were super disappointing last year, had that awful loss to Arizona in the play-in round. They fired their coach and brought in John Haynes, who I'm not sure is the answer. This team is just getting a little bit older, and again, I think their biggest flaw is not having high-end talent. They don't have... Forsberg is good, I'll give you that, but I don't think this is a team that has those players who can really put the team on their back and just go out there and get a goal when you need them to. And so, while I think this team is very solid, well-built, they were well coached, I thought, until they brought in John Haynes. But I don't know. I digress. I think this team is a good team that's going to be on that playoff bubble, but I don't think they have those elite performers to sort of take them over the hump and get them into the playoffs this year. So I have them falling just short and landing in fifth. In fourth place, I'm going with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, the Blue Jackets, I think, on paper, might not be as good as the Predators, but I think this is where coaching is a factor. I think John Tortorella may be the best coach in the entire NHL. He works so hard to get so much out of what on paper may be a little bit of an underwhelming roster. He gets his guys to buy in, to compete, and year in and year out, you have this scrappy defensive team that's going to fight all night long. And so, while Columbus may not have those superstars, I think they have just enough good pieces. I love Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think they have some super exciting young goalies. And so I think they have enough talent for that foundation to be there. And then with Tortorella's coaching, strategy, everybody buying in, that'll be enough for them to be this pesky opponent that I don't think is ever going to be a team right now that's going to win a Stanley Cup or push for a Stanley Cup. But it's going to be a team that's going to give other teams fits all night long. And in a shortened season, that'll be enough for them to grab a playoff spot. In third place in the Central Division, I'm going with the Dallas Stars. Now, the Stars, coming off that Stanley Cup final loss, I think they'll have another good year. Now, they have some questions with Seguin being out with injury. They're dealing with this COVID-19 breakout right now, and so they definitely face some adversity, but this is still largely the same team. I think they'll take a bit of a step back. I don't see them in the Stanley Cup Finals this year, but I think they're still a contender. I think they're still a good team, and with the right moves, if things fall into place, they could get there. Who knows? And I think at least they'll be a solid playoff team and take this third spot in the Central Division. But in second place in the Central Division, I'm going with the Carolina Hurricanes. This Hurricanes team, I think they're really, really close to being a contender. They are not quite there yet. Maybe they are this year, though. They weren't last year, had that disappointing playoff loss to the Bruins, but this team, I think, has some great ingredients for getting to that level. They have one of the best defense cores in the entire NHL. They have some fun, exciting talent on offense. This team is just fun to watch. They can score, they can play defense. I think people definitely were overlooking them because they're in this sort of small, not really a hockey market. But I think the way they play, their play style, they're well coached. They have some nice, exciting talent. I think that's sort of had people wake up to them and see that, oh, this Carolina team is a lot of fun and they can make some noise. And so I think they'll do just that this year and have a very good season in a competitive division. All the way up to second, I actually see them in this division. Now, again, I'm not sure about their goaltending. I still think they need a little bit more before they're challenging for a Stanley Cup, but I think they're good enough to be at least a contender who may make some noise in the playoffs and pretty easily snag this playoff spot in second. But in first in this division, I got to go with the Tampa Bay Lightning. These guys, they're the defending Stanley Cup champions, and I think once again they are going to be great. They return largely the same team. Now, Kucherov is out with injury, which will hurt them, but they just have so much other talent. This team really seems to have it all. They have, obviously, this high-end talent, but behind that, it's just all three phases of the ice, offense, defense, goaltending. They have these elite players. They have depth. They have coaching. This team, I think, is still a juggernaut, still perhaps the favorites for the Stanley Cup, and they should be able to, I think, win this division with ease. I think they're a little bit above everyone else. I think they're a cut ahead, and the challenge for them now will be, are they able to repeat? Because there are a lot of good teams in the NHL this year who are going to give them a run for their money. And some of those good teams are in the last and final division I'm going to be taking a look at, which is the East Division. And this is the division I think will be the best in the NHL. There are 4 or 5, maybe even 6 teams here who are very solid playoff contenders who all could surprise and make a run in the Stanley Cup playoffs in the postseason once that hits. And so I think, while there are some duds at the bottom of the division, when you get past those teams, you have some very solid squads who all, I wouldn't be surprised, to make a run for the playoffs. But the team I have in the bottom of this East Division has got to be the New Jersey Devils. The Devils, I don't know what to make about this team, man. I think they're really sort of just treading water. Again, they're bringing in some nice pieces, but I don't know if they're getting anywhere. I still feel like they really need a big shakeup because as things are now, it seems like they are very far away from getting back to that level that they were, I guess, all the way back in 2011, I think, against the Los Angeles Kings. They were that Stanley Cup finalist. They really have just been sort of in limbo, and they haven't been able to get anywhere. And so I don't think that's going to change this year. Maybe they'll get a really high draft pick and be able to bring in somebody who can make that change. But they have some high-end talent from the past few years, and that hasn't really panned out for them. So I have the Devils in last place in this division. In 7th place, I'm going with the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the Sabres are an interesting team. Definitely very intriguing, have some great storylines. Obviously, the big move was bringing in Taylor Hall on this huge 1-year contract. He's going to be exciting to see if he can figure it out, how he plays. And then, of course, they have some incredible skill to go along with him. So Jack Eichel obviously is the big one. I feel like he's got to get out of Buffalo eventually, but he's there right now. And he's obviously this elite talent that's going to keep them in games. And then, of course, on the back end, Rasmus Dahlin. I think he still needs to take another step forward, but already he's a great player, and I think he could get even better. And so they have these sort of exciting high-end pieces, but there is still so much more this team needs to do. I think it starts with goaltending, but the biggest thing is just depth. They really haven't built a team around those high-end talent that they have, and I think until they do that, they're still going to struggle, especially in this very good division. And so while they may be competitive somewhere else in the league, I think here in the East, with these shortened games, you really need to have that depth and to have this experienced team that's been together. I don't think Buffalo has that quite yet, so I have them in 7th. In 6th place, though, I'm going with the New York Rangers. This is a team I really think has great potential. Obviously, the big name, Alexis Lafreniere, first overall pick. So excited to see how he plays this year, but there is so much going for them beyond Lafreniere. Of course, Artemi Panarin, but then they have some great goaltending prospects, other young talent. Adam Fox looks good. This team, I think, is just very exciting. It seems like they're doing a rebuild right, and I think they're absolutely heading the right way, but I don't think they're going to be a team that has arrived just yet. But I think they're close. A season or two, and this will be a team that I think will be at the level of a playoff contender. But as I said, I think the East is the best division in hockey, and because of that, I don't think the Rangers will be any higher than 6th this year. In 5th place, I'm going with the New York Islanders. And yes, I have them missing the playoffs, which really pains me because this team was an Eastern Conference finalist, and they have just been so underrated by media over and over again. And I feel like I'm kind of part of the problem by putting them in 5th place because this team has that leader in Matt Barzal. They're so well coached under Barry Trotz, where they're just a defensive, scrappy team that's going to really play hard every night. And I absolutely love that about them. They're a lot like Columbus in a way, but the other teams in this division, the top 4, are all so skilled, so talented. And unfortunately for the Islanders, I think that skill and talent is going to be what puts those other teams above them. And so, while I think these guys are going to be very, very competitive, in the end, I have them falling just short of a playoff berth this year in the East Division. But in 4th place, the team I see snagging that final playoff spot, I have to go with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, obviously, the big story, the Pittsburgh Penguins knocked out by the Montreal Canadiens. Super disappointing. This team is getting older, they're losing some pieces, and I think as a result, especially being in such a good division, a lot of people are being bold and saying Pittsburgh will miss the playoffs. But just from my perspective, I can never count out talent. And Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, some of the best players in the entire league. I think they're sort of in a similar situation with Edmonton, where there are teams with lots of flaws, lots of holes, lots of question marks, but they have these elite game-changing players. And so when I evaluate a team, I look to who's going to be the best player on the ice night in, night out. Do they have those guys who can really take over games? And Pittsburgh has that. I think they have these clutch, veteran, experienced, highly skilled players. And so despite the many questions below them, that enough will be enough for Pittsburgh to get back into the playoffs. Though in the end, I don't know if they'll go much further than that, but we'll have to see. In 3rd place, I'm going with the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers are another nice young team that I really like what they're building. Obviously, Carter Hart is the breakout star. He's such a good goaltender, super young. I think he may have a few Vezina trophies in him, and I can't wait to see where he goes from that. But they've really built this team from the net out, and I think they have a great mix of veteran players like Giroux and also nice young talent. And so Philadelphia is a team that I really like, and I think they're going to be sort of a dark horse contender that could absolutely make some noise this year. And so I see them pretty easily grabbing a playoff spot. Even in this tough division, I have them in 3rd place. In 2nd place, though, I'm going with the Washington Capitals. The Capitals, I really like the moves they've made. Now, they've made some intriguing moves, bringing in veterans like Henrik Lundqvist, though he may not play this year, and Zdeno Chara. But I think this team is just still going to be good. Ovechkin, again, another one of those guys who can just take over games by himself. Despite getting older, he's pushing for that goal record, and I think he's going to have another great season in him. But unlike a team like Pittsburgh or Edmonton, I think the Capitals have done a good job of building around Ovechkin and building around that team. And so, of course, I love John Carlson on the back end. I like their young goaltender. I think this team is going to be, once again, very competitive, very solid, and be able to grab 2nd in this division. But in 1st place, I'm going with the Boston Bruins. The Bruins were the President's Trophy winner last year. They weren't able to make a run in the playoffs, unfortunately, but they're still a great team who returns most of what they had last year. Of course, they've lost their captain and leader in Zdeno Chara, lost a few other players like Torrey Krug, so I think there's a lot of questions about this team. Maybe people going into this season don't see them as good as they were the last couple of years, but I still think this team is going to be one of the best in hockey. I mean, their top line alone is absolutely incredible. But go beyond that, they have the goaltending to keep them in games all night long. They have a good defensive core, very well coached, great depth pieces. I think this team really has what you need to be a contender in this league. And so I think because of that, I have Boston taking home the top spot in this division. So that's going to do it for my roundup of every single division and where I think the teams are going to finish. But to quickly recap, who I have making the playoffs: in the North, I'm going with Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, and Toronto. In the West, I have Minnesota, St. Louis, Vegas, and Colorado. In the Central, I'm going with Columbus, Dallas, Carolina, and Tampa Bay. And then over in the East, I have Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Washington, and Boston. So those are who I see will be the field for the playoffs. And I think there are some very intriguing contenders in there, and a lot of teams who I wouldn't be surprised to make some noise. Of course, over in the North, I think the favorite has got to be Toronto. So what's going to happen is that one team from each of these divisions will be in the conference, the conference finals, right? So the 1 versus 4 of the division winners will face off, and 2v3. And so Toronto, I think, is going to be the team that makes it out of the North Division. I mean, I know they've fallen short in the playoffs so many times before. This year, though, I think they'll get it done. And so I have Toronto moving on, making it out of that North Division. In the West, I think out of that round robin of 4, I like Colorado here, which is really tough because I think if Vegas makes it out, they could easily win the cup too. Those two teams are both, I think, absolutely very well built teams that could make a serious run. But I think Colorado just has a little bit of an edge. Over in the Central Division, I got to go with Tampa Bay again. I think Tampa Bay is still absolutely loaded, absolute juggernaut. This team's going to be great. So yeah, that's who I have out of that division. And then in the East, I'm going with the Boston Bruins. I know I'm sort of just picking the teams I had winning the division, but I think that'll be an advantage. I think mostly with a season like this, the favorites, right? When you have these longer seasons, there's more chance for upsets, more chance for teams sort of to go on these runs. With everything shortened, it really depends on the talent, the experience that your team has together, how well built you are. You don't really have time to sort of surprise a lot of people. And so that's why I think all of these favorites I have as who's going to be in the conference finals. But basically what I see for matchups, I have number 1 Colorado taking on number 4 Toronto, and I would have Colorado moving on in that one. And then I'd have second-seeded Boston taking on third-seeded Tampa Bay, and this may be a surprise, but I have Boston moving on. Now, I know Tampa Bay is going to be absolutely the favorite going into this year, but I really like this Boston team. I think Tampa Bay will have that sort of cup hangover maybe, and Boston, meanwhile, is going to be hungry. They really want to win with the core they have right now, and I think that'll be enough. So that sets up a very exciting Stanley Cup final, which means what I'm predicting is that the 2021 Stanley Cup final will be between the Colorado Avalanche and the Boston Bruins. And man, this would be a very, very fun and exciting series. Both of these teams have good goaltending, good defense, and then these just star-studded players up front that would make such a fun, high-scoring, exciting, fast-paced series that I would love to see happen. I'm really hoping we get this one, and I think it's likely too, because both of these teams, I think, are built in all the right ways, really have, I think, the pieces necessary to be contenders, but in the end, only one of them can win. So I absolutely love this Boston team. I think they're great, but I have to make a prediction, and so my prediction is that the 2021 Stanley Cup champions will be your Colorado Avalanche. Yes, that's right. I'm going with the Avalanche. I think this will be the year they finally arrive, and I have them knocking off the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup final. This team is here. They're ready. I think they have everything you need, and this will be the year they finally put it all together. And I think Colorado honestly might have the makings of a modern-day dynasty. I wouldn't be surprised to see them over the next few years make consistent runs in the playoffs, because this team is well built, they're solid, and they're still very young and growing. I think they're only going to get better, and this year will be when they really put the league on notice. I think they'll be first in the division, first in the league, and I think they'll win the Stanley Cup as well. So there you have it. I'm going with Colorado as your Stanley Cup champions. But that's basically going to do it for this video. We've gone through every single team, given you that detailed rundown of how I think things are going to end up. But now I'd love to hear your thoughts. So please let me know down in the comment section below who you think will win the Stanley Cup this year and what you think of my predictions. I always love your feedback. I love to hear from you guys. So please go down there and let me know. But we have a very exciting season ahead of us. No matter what happens, I think we're all just happy that NHL hockey is back, even though it'll look a little bit different this year. We'll have some fun rivalries, very exciting to see how things go. And so if you want to be caught up on consistent coverage all season long, be sure to subscribe to my channel because I will always have these NHL videos coming out, predictions, previews, recaps, breaking down big news. It'll all be here. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please do that and leave a like on this video. But that's going to do it, guys. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support, and I'll see you next time.